You're watching Leafs Morning Take with host Nick Alberga and former NHLer Jay Rosehill. The show starts now.
Oh yes, the boys are back in town and 11 days away from the NHL trade deadline. It's the Monday edition of Leafs Morning Take presented by Bet365. Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill. How are we doing, Rosie?
What's happening? Starting a fresh week. It's weird. You got to get back in the NHL regular season vibe. It seemed like that was a long time talking about the Four Nations face-off, rightfully so, as exciting as it was. But we're back to Leafs hockey and pretty solid weekend for the fellas.
Very loose weekend in general for the NHL. I think a lot of you out there had a lot of success if you bet on some overs. I hope you did, Rosie.
Yeah, exactly. I think that was the play for sure. But nice to see some of these depth guys, including our boy Pontus, get on the board, man. That was it's a good sign.
Massive sign. Big weekend for Holmberg. Big weekend for the Maple Leafs. It's exactly how you want to come out after a 2-week break, is win both hockey games. And that they did against Carolina and Chicago. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets, whatever the moment. It's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION, all in uppercase today. That's NATION, NATION. Our Super Chat charity partner this season is Sick Kids. Want to make sure that your question or comment gets on the show. Hit us up with a Super Chat. Proceeds from our Super Chat go to Sick Kids, ranked the #1 research-intensive children's hospital in Canada and 3rd in the world. Can you explain how a player feels? I know some of these guys were on the ice for the better part of like half the week, but getting back to game action after missing a couple weeks?
Yeah, there's a feeling out period. I think, skating and having your practices and ramping it up to regular speed and energy, effort level, and workload. It's the legs for me, for most guys. I mean, if you ever took 2 days off, which you rarely get in that league, on that third day, you jump on the ice and your legs are they're a little crickety, they're a little burning, and it takes a minute to get back to it. But all in all, with those guys being as in good a shape as they are and the athletes they are these days, that goes away pretty quick. And I imagine they get back to game speed pretty fast.
Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, presented by Fountain Tire. Join us for Flight Night, Saturday, March 8th at Greta Bar YYZ as we host a watch party for the Toronto-Colorado game. As part of Flight Night, one lucky winner and a guest to their choice will win a spot in the first ever TLN Nation vacation to Nashville, happening March 20th to 23rd. All you need to do to be eligible is purchase a $10 ticket for this event at nationgear.ca. That's nationgear.ca. You'll automatically be entered into the raffle draw. On top of that, you can buy additional raffle tickets for the draw for $20 a pop in support of One Broken Biker. This trip is getting closer and closer. My buddy Mark, who frequently listens and watches this show, coming on this trip, he is fired up, dude.
I know, it's exciting. It's like the next thing to look forward to. We're checking things off the list as we barrel down this season. I can't believe it's getting to be the end of February here, but that means we're closer to the nation vacation. Yeah, I'm definitely getting excited for it. I went to Nashville a couple of years ago, and it was unreal. One of my favorite cities to go to. It's just got a really wicked vibe. So if you're going or thinking about going, it's going to be a good one. If you haven't pulled the trigger yet, just pull the trigger.
I like that. It is the first ever TLN Nation vacation, again, happening March 20th to 23rd. Part of the experience will be going to the Toronto-Nashville game on the Saturday. We're going to do a winery tour coming up too. We're offering 2 packages, one with flights, $24.50 plus tax, one without, $12.99 plus tax. Hotel rooms are double occupancy. For more information on how to book, head on over to nationgear.ca. That's nationgear.ca, or check out the link in our show bio. Life's too short for ordinary vacations. All right, in support of Sick Kids, Tony Van Dinther sends us a super chat. Appreciated, Tony. Proud Canadian, happy Leaf fan, and delighted to live in Florida. I bet.
Wow, he's got her all covered. Good for him.
Yeah.
Probably a good way to do it. And lots of success for all of his teams lately. So we'll see, man. It's nice to I can't believe how close we are to the trade deadline. I don't know. I just question what's going to get done. It's going to be an interesting one. I think me and you are jumping in on some trade deadline talks on that Friday. So looking forward to it. I hope the Leafs make some kind of a splash. I just can't see how, who, when, why. It's an interesting time. We'll see. Maybe Tree's got something up his sleeve.
Maybe they reunite two brothers, which we'll get to a bit later on here in the podcast. But there's been so much fallout from the Four Nations. Firstly, I'd love to get your thoughts on the focus of some of these injuries, like Matthew and Brodie Tkachuk, McAvoy's out, Theodore's out. I just love the aspect of guys putting their bodies on the line for their respective nations. I think that's so cool. We see that come playoff time quite a bit.
Yeah, it's great when guys play hard and go after it and put their, put everything on the line. It's unfortunate when that leads to an injury, and it's got that extra dose of unfortunate factor when he's not even doing it for the team that pays him a lot of money to play hockey for them. And I imagine that's kind of the point of contention with ownership in the NHL. And what do those guys get for their investment when those guys go into a tournament like that and get banged up and are going to miss time, and their teams are obviously going to suffer, as every guy in that tournament is a high end quality player that means a lot to their organization. So that is the one caveat, but all you can really do is hope for the best and hope it doesn't happen. But now, a time like now where you're reflecting on the tournament and you see the aftermath when the players like the Tkachuks are banged up like that, and if they're missing games, it's not a great sign. You hope you don't see it, but it's kind of unavoidable. And I don't really know what the answer is, aside from not playing or not playing hard, which I don't like anything about that. So I think it's just one of the byproducts of a tournament with the intensity that one had.
Edward Lee writes in, sorry after Four Nations regular season is like watching beer league. It's so true. Watching hockey over the weekend, I'm like, man, I miss the Four Nations.
I know it was kind of hard to get up for almost after what we've been through. And I mean, that just shows how great that tournament was. But yeah, you wonder about some of those players too, like the Marners and the Matthews and whatnot. You're playing against that high of caliber of talent, and then you go back to playing the San Jose Sharks or something, or the Chicago Blackhawks. It's like, yeah, and I mean, some room out here for me. I imagine it's a pretty good feeling and a reminder of how good those players are.
A bit of a hangover, but yeah, I think that was the big story of the weekend, which we'll get to, is a lot of the guys who took time off look rejuvenated. The guys who played in the Four Nations looked okay, but not at their best, certainly. And we got some cool news over the weekend as well. Mitch Marner is going to be a father for the first time. Do you recall the moment you found out you were going to be a dad for the first time?
Yeah, I do actually. My wife just had the old pee stick and just kind of like walked in and showed me, and I don't know, I wasn't really prepared for it. I guess I was kind of young and we were trying to have a kid, but it didn't take very long, and all of a sudden like the reality hits you. It was pretty interesting. My brother was going through at the exact same time, which was pretty neat as we're quite close. So yeah, a lot of emotions go through it. You don't really know what to expect, but she told me as we were going golfing with my brother a foursome, and we had a good day on the golf course, kind of absorbing the idea of being a dad. And I don't know if anyone's really ready for that, but at the end of the day, the best thing I've ever done by a million, and some pretty wicked memories. So congrats to Mitch and his wife for that. That's exciting.
My guy Rosie does not miss, clearly. I love how you're like, yeah, it was quick.
It was quick.
Yeah.
First pump dump, and she was a creation. No, my wife's a breeder, so she got pregnant easy, and yeah, we did her twice, and she's bugging me nowadays thinking we should have had a third. So we'll see.
Would you like to break down how everything transpired, how you had the kid, or is that good? You good?
How I had it?
Yeah. How are babies made?
How does this happen? It's fun making them. I thought it would take a little longer.
It's fun making for them.
Congrats to Mitchie. What about you? Yes. You're starting to get a little older in the years there. Is there going to be a child in your future? I mean, you got to probably get a girl first, eh?
At the Leafs Nation 401 here on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Leafs Morning Take, wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. That's more for After Dark. I think we got to have a special After Dark show.
Is that like dinner at your parents' house conversation?
Oh, dude, yeah. Every Sunday I go over. What's going on, buddy? King Street West is happening. Greta Bar.
I like it. You think you're gonna find your future wife at Greta?
Yes. Yeah, her name's gonna be Greta, and she's gonna work at Greta. That's the dream. Nice. Yeah, that's the dream.
Sounds like a keeper to me.
Maybe I'll find somebody at Firehouse Subs. We put out the commercial. We need a review on this commercial, dude. the editing staff did a tremendous
They
job
did.
with this thing, first and foremost.
Yeah, they did. I don't really like seeing myself doing that stuff. It's kind of funny and awkward. But you had the majority of the lines and the appearances, so I was just kind of an afterthought, which was okay with me.
I think you did great. WeCF baby, would Nick's baby come out with a full set of eyebrows? Very, very. That would be one hairy ass baby. I'll tell you that right now.
Especially if you married some had a baby with some big Italian girl. I think that would even ramp up the hairy eyebrowness to this
Wow,
young
Lisa
kid.
Gritton's pissed at you. Why make fun of Nick? Shots not funny. Ooh.
Yeah, I didn't. You do take a lot of heat in this chat, but
I do, but no, I actually laughed at
Go
that.
ahead.
I think Rosie's got every reason to get on me a bit. I'm mid-30s and single as hell. But anyways, as the official sub of the Toronto Maple Leafs, check out Firehouse Subs for a limited edition souvenir cup that is perfect for game day celebrations. Available in select restaurants across Ontario, fans can collect this team-inspired souvenir cup with the purchase of any sub combo while supplies last. Be sure to check out the Brisket Hat Trick. It's a Canada-exclusive menu item. This hot and hearty sub is piled high with smoked turkey breast, Virginia honey ham, and beef brisket. It is topped off with sweet and tangy slaw, barbecue sauce, and mayo, and served on a toasted sub roll. Head to your local Firehouse Subs to grab your limited edition Toronto Maple Leaf Souvenirs Cup today. That's a souvenir cup, not Souvenirs Cup. I don't know why I added the S there, but what a
Mouthful.
weekend for the Leafs, Rosie. The big story for me, I think you would agree, the depth pieces, unlikely sources. They got not one but two goals from the blue line. I loved it, man.
Do we have the footage of me suggesting that Steve should be called up and given a chance if you want
We
your
can
depth
find
in
it.
bottom
We can
six
find it.
to I
Yeah.
mean, you would have that teed up, am I right? It was a no-brainer in my mind. Like, this guy's played 11 games for the Leafs, and he was like talked about, I don't know, you had him written off, a bunch of people did. It was kind of before I think we were even doing this show that he got cracks at the Leafs, averaging 8 minutes a night, 11 games, and he is just lighting up the American Hockey League with offense. And their bottom six is it's just like, why? How did this not happen earlier? With lots of injuries too, shuffling around the lineup. Like, how is this guy not got a look? He gets one, boom, instantly becomes effective out there. So that was awesome to see. I imagine he'll still get those looks and, some chemistry with Domi and Robertson, the D getting in on the offense. I mean, we have been talking about what are the deficiencies of this team, and this weekend they seem to have stepped it up in all those areas, which obviously for a team that's looking to make a run is pretty exciting.
I like this Steve story. Scores on Saturday. I'm there, by the way, at the game. He scores great, but you're telling me with a serious face, he's going to be like a bottom six guy for you in the playoffs. He's got like 11 games of experience. Like, I think this is more of a next season thing if he sticks, if he doesn't get claimed on waivers. Like, let's be honest here.
How do you get experience without playing? I think he should play the rest of the season. And if he continues to find his way and to keep his confidence and get some opportunity and gets clicking with some guys, then absolutely he could be a factor in the playoffs. Guys like that come up all the time, the unexpected
Yeah.
stories and the unexpected help on a team that goes on a run. He could easily be one of those. That's the hope.
Yeah, I think the hope is that he's Bob McMahon 2.0,
Mhm.
but I think it's a bad time for Steves to get called up. You're about to add players to your roster, and I think
Yeah.
he's going to get lost in the shuffle again.
Well, he's cheap. So, I mean, if you need to make room and you're going to add something, you need to move others out and you need to replace them with cheap players. And he's cheap. So, I don't know. We'll see. Again, Tree Living, who knows what he has up his sleeve. If he's going to move pieces around, I mean, start to throw names around on guys that are making some money that you might have to bury somewhere or get rid of or have someone take off your hands, which is unlikely. But I don't know. I just keep thinking someone might be the odd man out, and we're gonna have to wait and see who it is. But I can imagine that he wants to do something to at least say, "I've made myself better here with the opportunity of a trade deadline."
I love the fire in the bonnet of a lot of these depth players. Pontus Holmberg, I thought was awesome. They elevated him to the second line. They put that third line back together. I thought Domi had a strong weekend. I thought he was good on Saturday. Gets rewarded with the 2 apples on Sunday against Chicago. Like, this is what you want to see. And we don't see this very often where I don't want to say the big boys were an afterthought, but they weren't the main focus. And when you're getting secondary offense the way they did, this is a tough team to beat because more times than not, Matthews will be there producing. Marner pointless on the weekend, if you can believe it. Tavares had a pretty good weekend. But I think that just only enhances this team's chances. If you get that secondary scoring, man, you're in business for sure.
Well, big time, and like McDavid said after their loss last night, he's like, some teams come firing out of the gates after a break, and other teams have a bit of a slow start. And it's nice that, I kept thinking about, especially Austin and Mitch after that tournament going, my God, was that a roller coaster of emotions? I imagine it sucks the energy out of you and you feel pretty depleted at a point in the season when you're kind of already feeling that way. So pretty tough turnaround for those guys. I was curious to how they were doing. And on the flip side of that, I was thinking about those guys that, went to Cabo and got to relax a little bit and had a big breather. And I mean, as mentally as it is physically, that's just such a refreshing break for a player. And it was nice that those big boys weren't expected to be the best players on the planet on that short turnaround. The other guys stood up and answered the call and showed up and were impactful players and took the heat off of those stud players. And maybe they can get a little bit of a break mentally if they don't feel like they need to be the difference maker in a weekend like that one that just passed. So kind of a nice little story for them, but eventually I hope they kind of regain their footing and get firing on all cylinders, because I mean, if that roster is getting contribution from everywhere, we know what the firepower is like up front. We know what the D can be when they're playing their best, and our goaltenders are. I have a lot of faith in them. So, I mean, if that is the case with these, depth pieces stepping up, they're going to be a team that's going to be tough to beat regardless. And the factor for them right now is keeping up with that, is keeping on that trend and trajectory of having everyone chip in.
Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button at the Leafs Nation 401, where you can do so in support of Sick Kids. SEO Sanganum send us a super chat. Really appreciate it. With an easy strength to schedule the rest of the way and the expectation of surging in the standings, you think this could make management overconfident in the team and make them less likely to add at the trade deadline? That's a really interesting question, because you look at some of the names available, and it is musical chairs this time of year. More so comes down to, like, what are you willing to move? We know they don't have a first round pick this year. They do next year. Are they going after Scott Lawton? Are they going after Ryan O'Reilly again? Is Minton in play? Is Cowan in play? I don't think that affects whatsoever the long-term goal of the Stanley Cup playoffs. I think it's about finding the right fit right now, quite frankly.
Yeah, and everyone's throwing around what that is. It's a good question though. Like, if you start, I mean, it's typical Leaf stuff, right? Like, they're playing well, so you turn it into like a problem. Well, this is going to make them think that they're good, and they're not, and they're going to not. I don't think it's going to change what Tree does. I think that it's a long shot that a really important trade comes to fruition and gets to the finish line. I'm sure there's been lots of conversations, but just looking at the cap and the roster and the construction and what they have and what they have to give and who's going to want what in return for player XYZ, it's to get to the finish line is going to be difficult. I don't think it's going to be like he has multiple options and do I pull the trigger on this or do I go that direction, or maybe I have a sense of confidence in the team because they're playing well coming down the stretch. I just think it's going to be just in general tough to put a deal together and, like I said, get it to the finish line. But that's Tree's job, man. He's shown that he can be creative with that in the past, and we'll see what he can pull off. I'm not really doing any predictions or anything or putting together mock trades or any of that this year. I just don't see a point in it. I'm really willing to just sit back and say, all right, Tree, let me know if you've done anything. And when that deadline hits, we'll be there to break it down. No question. But as far as predictions, I'm just staying out of it this year.
I want a center and I want a defenseman. I think they need at least one more depth defenseman. Doesn't have to be a big name, but I want a guy with some size, preferably shoots right, by the way, and a center. I said this a couple of weeks ago. I'd love to add like 2 bottom 6 players, but I think Calle Yarncroke's going to be one of those guys. So add one more, and I think it'll come up the middle. I'm just like, who's that guy going to be? Is it going to be Ryan O'Reilly? Is it going to be Scott Lawton? Do they go off the board? Jake Evans in Montreal could make sense. The musical chair is attached to this because there's so many teams around them looking to probably do the same thing too.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think just with the eyeballs on this team, there's a lot of speculation, and they're always brought up as a potential target. But you got to remember, there's other people out there that are interested in these players, and if somebody has value, they're valuable to everybody, and most people are looking for the same type of things. But yeah, I just wondered to add a piece that's solid. Like, do you take a guy and bury his money in the minors that it's unexpected, and just like, I
Yeah.
know, put them on waivers and bury them and get them off the cap. Is that something that you would do if you're trying to add a piece? And then what are you giving up to add? Who's unloading you something for nothing? I have no idea in Tree Living's mind if Minton and Cowan are on the table or not. Um, it's just tough, and you don't have an arsenal of picks to get a deal to come to fruition. So again, tough one. I could be totally wrong. I'm far from the master of like predicting trades and free agencies and all that kind of stuff. But I can't help but think there's not going to be a huge splash this year. And if you can add a couple of pieces here, maybe a righty D or maybe someone that can play center, fine. But as far as a big name guy that kind of like shocks everybody, I just don't see it. But time will tell.
Yeah. A lot of moving parts, but we've talked about this ad nauseum the last couple of years doing this podcast. Just because you get the best piece doesn't necessarily mean they're going to fit and it's going to work for your team. Oftentimes, it's like that versatile guy who get picked up, who plays all 3 lines, all 4 lines, who floats in and out of the lineup. Like, he ends up being the big addition. So I know ultimately you want that biggest fish, but I always remember the New York Rangers a couple of years ago, Patrick Kane, Vladimir Tarasenko. It went on and on and on, and then they get to the playoffs, and it's like no chemistry whatsoever. So I think that aspect is not spoken about enough from a GM standpoint. Is like rocking the boat too much this time of year. You talk about chemistry. I know exactly where you're talking. You're talking about Ryan Reeves. You take Ryan Reeves off this roster, how does that shake the room? I think it shakes the room. He is very well liked in that Leafs room.
Yeah, there's players and glue guys and different names for it, but to have veteran presence and whether they show up on the score sheet at the end of the night is not always the biggest factor in having a hockey team that works. How many spots are you willing to give guys like that is always up for debate, and people have their different philosophies. But 100%, like, what goes on in a room, and to go on a deep run in the playoffs takes a group of guys that get along really well together, that gel together, that care, that are willing to do the extra thing for the guy beside them, and all those, things that people always say when it comes to having a winning team. But yeah, that's a factor as well, is how are guys going to gel? How are they going to work in the locker room? And I mean, they added a Luke Schenn and a Ryan O'Reilly a couple years ago and looked damn good,
Yeah.
but still didn't quite, get them over the hump. And you just wonder what is needed to get them over. And like you say, yeah, personalities and character have a lot to do with that as well.
Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button at the Leafs Nation 401, where you can do so. Full disclosure, we had a team meeting late last week and decided, hey, did we chase David Ayres? It's the 5-year anniversary of David Ayres, and we shut it down. And I'm at the
No.
game on Saturday, Rosie. It's Carolina in town once again. And watching that third period, I felt like I was about to see something transpire again that I didn't want to see. But it's not really talked about. I haven't seen it. The composure by Chris Tanev around the net to feed Austin Matthews, who took the hit to make the play and score a Crosby-esque empty netter, solidified the victory. But it got hairy. It was very similar to a degree to the first time they played Carolina when they blew that lead in the first period. This time it was in the third period, but it was an interesting return on Saturday.
Yeah, and I mean, there's some wonky bounces going on there. I wouldn't say they, collapsed or gave it away or had this calamity of errors. I mean, poor Stoley's trying to find this puck several different times. They make it close, but guess what? No, they shut the door and make sure that doesn't happen. A bit of a flicker of a scare, but I didn't put a whole lot of stock into it. You can't really predict those types of weird bounces, which both of them were, and move on. At the end of the day, a win's a win. It's the NHL, man. It's not always as easy to shut the door. Carolina is a really good team, man. I focus on the positives and look at the lead they got, the start they got, to come out of the gates after a break when you know that there could be excuses on why they didn't have everything going for them, but they didn't, and guys stepped up when they needed to. I just look at it as a solid week, and I know it was kind of, you could say they made it close against Carolina there, but I don't buy it, man. Some wonky bounces. I think it was a solid win, both of them, for a weekend where it could have gone either way with where guys' heads were at after that huge break. Like McDavid said, you can come out hot or you can come out flat. And fortunately for the Leafs, they look pretty good.
They did, and again, it was the complementary pieces doing all the work on in both games, quite frankly, Saturday and Sunday. But I thought Anthony Stolarz again Very, very solid. That's an evolving story throughout this season. Joseph Wall, like when those two guys are healthy, what a 1-2 punch. Imagine being a player on that roster and knowing either one of those guys can stand on their head and win you a hockey game. It's got to feel good.
Yeah, it's so nice because the second guy isn't really like a, oh, where do we risk a loss, and how do we rest our number one and against which opponent, and then you see them going, it's like, okay, well, this is the one that they're willing to risk it, and it's not that story. It's like it's who plays against the hottest team, and it could be either one, and you don't even know. Like, what do you think if the playoffs started tomorrow? Who do you think gets the start?
Stoli.
Me too. I don't know. He just seems so solid, so big. I think he just is never swimming around in that crease. He's just everywhere, and I really like playing him. But just certainly far, not to say that to go to Wool on another night is like, ooh, to play him against the Blackhawks. Like, it's not. It's like any one of them could play, the Washington Capitals, and you could feel pretty solid about it. It's a nice feeling to have, one that Leafs fans are not too particularly used to having, which is just one of the wickedest stories of this season. And I hope it pays off in spades, which oftentimes having 1-2 goalies like that is a blessing.
Invictus Maneo writes in, goaltending is going to be huge in the playoffs. Huge, he adds. And we both agree. And the chat, a lot of the folks in the chat say Stoli would be the guy for them right now. But
Yeah.
again, it's got to feel so good. There's no drop off. Like, you're so right. Now, a lot has evolved and changed since your playing days, where the backup was the backup for a reason. Where now it's like any time out, you have a really good shot of winning, even if you don't have your best effort, because you have a Stolars, because you have a Wall. But it's kind of bizarre and weird to have that confidence as a Leafs fan in the crease, but I really do right now. Like, I feel great about these guys. Stolarz has given no reason to suggest that the first half was a blip, even coming back from the injury. Like that, that's a great story too. He comes back, same guy. I love that.
Yeah, that is huge. And he was out a long time, like a lot of weeks, like longer than I thought. And by the time he came back, that was the big hold your breath. Like, is he going to be the same? Is he going to feel the same? Does he need to get his confidence back? What needs to happen to see him back at the pace that he was playing at? And he just picks up right where he left off, which is amazing. And it makes me think about, years in the past where maybe the goaltending wasn't quite there, wasn't quite as consistent. And you see them play these games and they could play so damn good. And, it would normally be a 4-2 win, but just, that squeaker and, just one or two squeakers a game. And it's the difference maker. And then you're talking about how garbage this team is and what they like, just to have a goalie to make a couple of those saves, 2 or 3 saves throughout 60 minutes, is usually the difference between like a really good feeling leaving a weekend or a game and having all these negative talks. We've been there before, obviously, where we know what it feels like, and it's nice to be on the other side of that, where a team could apply pressure and be peppering you and be hemmed in your D zone. You're not even worried like you used to be. You're just like, all right, Stoli will kick this out, and eventually they'll get out. He'll make the 2 saves he needs to. Why? And fan the flames of this pressure they're going to put on you, and then you go take the momentum back and get an empty netter, and it's game over. It's such a drastic difference from having shaky goaltending.
Lisa Grinton via the chat, we have 2 starters. That is precisely put, but that's what it feels like from our perspective watching this Leafs team, where I think you can make a strong opinion on both guys leading up to the Stanley Cup playoffs. I think ultimately they'll decide on one guy and they'll go from there. But I just think the way he's played since coming back from injury, Anthony Stolarz would be my guy. And even the fact, a little thing like getting the start after the break suggests the team feels the same way right now.
Yeah, I would think so. I imagine they'll probably, like, there's a ways to go, but if the playoffs started tomorrow, I think you just go with Stoli and you just ride them until
Yeah.
something changed or something happened. And if you go on a long run, you're going to need 2. I don't think many teams go deep in the playoffs where they literally just ride one guy the whole bloody time. You used to do that, but it's a little bit more of a mix. And I don't see it being a problem as like Boston, for example, when you got Swayman and Allmark, and who do you play? And you literally say, we're going to switch, hit these guys. I think that's weird. That's tough. You kind of need one guy to be like, okay, this is our starter. This is what we're going to roll with. And until things change, that's the idea. And I kind of assume from the hands that they have showed, that's kind of where they're leaning to with the Maple Leafs management.
Trenholm McDonough writes in probably the best goalie tandem in the league. I don't think probably. I think it is. I
Yeah.
think when you look pound for pound around the league in actual tandems, we're not talking about like a Winnipeg where it's a Hellebuck and then a Comrie. This is just like a two-headed monster.
Yeah.
I think they are the best in the league, quite frankly.
And isn't that funny going back to the
I know.
summertime when they got these two guys, instant criticism like, "Oh yeah, this is going to work. A career backup with a guy with no experience who's always hurt." And they were just ripping on this saying, "Well, this season's a wash." And I think that reasons like that is why you got to have some faith in the potential. Like what is the potential of these guys? Like the potential of Stoli being good was there. A lot of things had
Yeah.
to happen. He had to like understand how to play in Toronto, not be worried about the spotlight, not be thrown off by the amount of pressure that comes with being in that position for the Maple Leafs. Um, Neither of them have stayed healthy, but it hasn't seemed to, damage the team too badly. So as good as it could have gone with the goaltending situation, looking back to the summer, it's gone exactly that. And again, injuries were included there as well. So it's not like you're holding your breath waiting for that to happen. It's already happened. Like the worst case scenario has already happened with Wolsey didn't even make it to the opening face-off. We lost Stoli for like 12 weeks and we're still thinking as highly as we do of these two is an awesome sign.
Man, I couldn't believe, and I don't know if you caught it, the statistic about the Leafs in Chicago. Like
Yeah.
that was their first regulation win since 2003.
In like 22 years, I'm thinking back to like, I guess every time I remember leaving the United Center,
You
I guess
lose.
we didn't have a good it wasn't a good mood going on, but I could not believe it was that long. Like, that's an insane statistic, especially considering they haven't been the greatest team in the last handful of years. Like, you don't get a regulation win there in 22 years. I had to rewind it because I thought I heard it improperly, but it was what it was. It blew my mind too.
Well, 14 tries, and I think adding context to it, the Leafs only play Chicago twice a season, so it's like once every year, and that's why it's taken
Still,
so long. But it's also like there was an era there where Chicago was a
was
team you
good.
just couldn't beat, quite frankly.
Yeah, true, but there's 22 years, that's like several
I know.
generations and general managers and captains and
Lockouts.
coaches and everything. It was surprising to hear that. Pretty cool of them to get that. It's things like that, like when you're betting, you think, okay, well, Toronto's going to have their way, but then there's those little caveats. Did you know they haven't? Did you know? And you've been, vocal about some of those streaks that they've had, and they always struggle against X and Y, and it usually holds up. And if
Yeah.
you've ever been doing that before last night's game, you would have been right in thinking they can't get a W in regulation in the United Center. But thankfully, they broke that curse last night.
Your boy Tyler Bertuzzi has to be in one in Chicago. I know he got the money and he got the contract. Do you think he regrets signing there? I know Bedard's there, but they're nowhere close to competing that team. They suck.
Yeah, it's not fun, I wouldn't imagine. It's always tough being, especially an organization like that has a lot of pride. I mean, they were like a modern day dynasty, you could almost say. Like, what did they win 3 cups in 5 years? Like, no one
Yeah.
was doing that. Like, there was Pittsburgh and there was Chicago for like the longest time there at the end of the 2000s, early 2010s. They were ridiculous. So they have a lot of pride in themselves. It's not like they're this throwaway franchise, but certainly struggling right now. At the end of the day, a team like that has to just continually try to get better, pay attention to the details, be professional, show up every day and put in the work and just wait for your time to slowly get better. It's a painful process, but I don't know what Bertuzzi's thinking. It's a wicked city, good organization. You got up and comers, more draft picks coming, but yeah, it sucks to lose, man. And when you know you're gonna like they know they're not doing anything this year, so like it's hard to stay focused and bring your best and show up every night when you know you're not really playing for anything. It's a shitty feeling, one that athletes try to avoid.
You know what's wild is TJ Brodie, his NHL career could end this season. From what I understand, I watched quite a bit of Chicago games and around the league. He's going to get bought out this summer. Like
Yeah.
he's barely a top 6 guy on the Hawks, and it just what the hell has happened to TJ Brodie? Like the first 2 years of his 4-year deal with the Maple Leafs, he was outstanding. And then something just happened where his play went off the cliff and he just never got back to that level ever again.
I know I don't, with the additions of, our OELs and Tanevs, and I don't miss Brodie swimming around lost out there.
No.
And it seemed
Yeah.
like he was just kind of fighting it and struggling. And obviously that's continued. He was getting scratched this year. And like you say, potential buyout, not ideal. I'm glad that we're not having as many of those conversations as we used to. I mean, Justin Hull, do you remember that guy? They would just like Keith would play
Try
him
not to.
religiously, and
Yeah.
he was absolutely lost out there all the time. And you'd watch him just fumble around and the puck just get in the back of the net every shift he went out there. It seemed like sometimes it just reminds you what it was like to be struggling to have the decor that we have now. While it's not perfect and there's still
Yeah.
some deficiencies, and I hope they shore it up a little bit. The big boys are certainly a lot bigger than they used to be, and it's nice to watch them operate out there, and they contribute obviously to a lot of the wins that the Leafs have rattled off this year.
For the life of me, I still don't know how Justin Hall received a multi-year deal after the season he had with the Maple Leafs.
I
Like,
know.
I don't know who his agent is, but damn, what an awesome job selling Steve Yzerman on that plan. And within, I think, 15 games, he was a healthy scratch for Detroit, and they're hating that signing. I'm not to speak for them, but they are.
You would think so, man. I was not in love with that guy in a Maple Leafs jersey and wanted him gone as fast as possible. I was yelling for him to get scratched multiple times. How do you play him? Then there'd be like last minute of a period and end of a game when you really need something in a tie game, and he just continued to roll out there. And I was I was flabbergasted by it. And to see someone scoop him up on a multi-year deal was quite shocking too. So
Yeah.
anyway, I don't want to bag on guys too much. It's
No.
just nice that we don't have to worry about that as much anymore. Again, the OELs and the Tanevs and the additions that we've had, and some of the even Benoit stepping up in certain ways. I know he's kind of further down in the depth chart, but I like what we have and where we're headed. And if they bolster that even more so, I think they're in a pretty good place.
Mike Batson writes in, we need Rantanen. That is a peculiar conversation because he was dealt like a month ago, but there are a lot of people wondering if Rantanen could get dealt again. Conversation came out over the weekend. There's been numbers exchanged. Unsurprisingly, Carolina coming in, it sounds like under 14 million bucks. I'm sorry to break it to anybody there. It's not going to get the job done. I'm sorry. Like that's just not going to sign Mikko Rantanen. I heard it's around 110, 8 years. I think you're going to have to exceed that if you're Carolina. And they don't seem like the team who's going to pay the money necessary to bring and sign a guy like Mikko Rantanen, which means he could be back on the market here in the next 11 days leading up to the trade deadline, March 7th. But the Leafs have been linked to this guy, and I have no clue why or how they'd make that happen in the next 11 days, especially with Carolina, who is a bona fide cup contender.
Yeah, linked to the Leafs by people who forget there's a salary cap. I guess we're talking like if you unload Mitch Marner, you could put on a Rantanen, but I don't think that's on the table right now. And I don't, how it's not happening. Carolina is notoriously cheap. Their owners do not like to spend money. It is not a very well kept secret that they're a cheap organization. So I imagine they'll dig their heels in on their number, but I just can't help but think that to get rid of Natchez and to make the deal that they had to get Rantanen to Carolina, they would have had a pretty solid idea of what they could do with locking him down. And it just doesn't seem like that was the case. It would be wild for them to lose him. Obviously, you would need to get a lot back in return if you're not going to sign him. And the time's ticking here. So I imagine they're scrambling, racking their brain with every possibility to make something happen, whether it's signing him or getting as much in return. But you can't give up what they gave up and not have a whole lot to show for it after the fact if you can't sign that guy.
As Zach Phillips writes in, you can get Rantanen for 2.3 mil against the cap, and maybe they retain salary again. You just never know. But for me, it was more so like, what are you giving up? If you're Carolina, you're not looking to recoup those assets. You're looking for players who are going to be slotted onto your roster. They're going to help you compete for a cup this season. I don't think the Leafs are a fit to make a deal with Carolina for Rantanen right now.
You could get him for 2.3 million. I have not gone down that rabbit hole on all the double retention and whatnot, but all I know is that to get someone, you have to give something, and people don't give you players like him for not much, and they don't eat salary for no reason. There's caveats and things that are in there, and we just don't have. The Toronto just doesn't have the depth and the pieces to trade to make it to make the person you're dealing with feel like you're getting a deal that can get done. And I think that no matter what Tree Living shakes at people, I think they're there's just not going to be enough interest for what he has to offer because they're thin in draft picks and prospects and guys that are on good contracts. For example, it's kind of the opposite. So we'll see. Again, interesting times, but I'm glad we're not Carolina having to deal with that situation.
Yeah, folks in the chat saying it can work. Yes, it can work. We're not disputing that. At least, like, I am not. From a money standpoint, the double. If you recall, the third team in the trade, the 3-way deal, so the money was retained, so they can make it work financially. It's more so like, what are you giving up to get the player in Rantanen? Again, for a team like Carolina, who is a bona fide cup contender, but it's just such a weird situation, like how you make that deal and not find a way to re-sign the guy. But it happened last year with Jake Gensel. But you look at what Martin Necas is doing right now for Colorado alongside Nathan McKinnon. It's like, wow, the asset management doesn't look very strong right now if they can't re-sign Rantanen here in Carolina.
I know it almost looked like that deal was like a total surprise to a lot of people. Usually a deal of that magnitude, you have a sit down, you have a talk, and you get on the same page. But it seemed like it was just like a trigger pull, and that's showing up now with some of the rumors going on that they may not be able to sign him, which I thought was kind of a foregone conclusion when that deal went down. But stranger things have happened, I guess. It's an interesting thing to watch.
Put it this way, the folks in the chat make a great point. Carolina needs a goaltending. What if Carolina approaches you hypothetically and it's like, we'll think about it. Would you include one of Stolarz or Woll in a trade? What would you say?
Tough,
I
man.
know.
I mean, it would be tempting. I mean, we do have kind of an embarrassment of riches with both goalies, as we've talked about, but you kind of need that, and you're going to have to rely on that. And are you going to be too thin if you unload a Woll? But then Rantanen's pretty appealing. It's an interesting thought, man. I imagine something like that would have to happen in order to get a deal like that across the finish line, which I don't know. I don't know how much Tree wants to rock the boat. It's going to be interesting to see.
I'll just add, Carolina refuses to play Freddie Anderson against the Leafs. I don't know what's going on there. Like, why did Kochetkov play that game on Saturday? Freddie will not play the Leafs, and when he does, he gets lit up. It's wild. It's wild, dude.
In his head, man, they must think he's got some squirrels going on upstairs against his former team. But it does seem to be a pattern of them being not being too willing to play him against the old Maple Leafs.
They got a sick team. They're not winning with Kochetkov and Anderson. I've been saying that for a while. I talked to my Canes buddies. I know some of the broadcasters there. I'm like, you guys have a great team, but like, are you really going to count on Pyotr Kochetkov or Freddie Anderson specifically in the playoffs? Like, he's allergic to the crease in the playoffs, that guy. Not to harp on him, but it's true. It's true.
I remember Freddie playing with him in the lockout. He was quite a bit younger there in Anaheim's farm system or organization, but he was either so goddamn good or else really bad, and it was apparent in practice, and it showed up in games too. But like, for how good he could be, he was just very streaky, and his bad was really bad. Like, you look at, we're talking about Stoli and Woll, and it's like they just don't have, they have a foundation that keeps them playing at a level that's pretty consistent, and then their good is just really good. I mean, that's the formula. But yeah, I remember Anderson being quite streaky, and I don't know if it's a mental thing or if he seemed to lose his confidence pretty easily, and I think that might still be with him as we talk about what's going on in Carolina.
Free agent this summer is Freddie Anderson, so we'll see where he ends up here. I don't think Carolina's going to re-sign him, but stranger things have happened. Let's get to the Schenn conversation, Rosie. In his Saturday headlines segment this past weekend, Elliot Friedman suggested some teams were looking at reuniting the Schenn brothers on the same team. Should the Leafs look into that, in your opinion?
I just can't.
You love this.
I can't for the life of me think of a general manager that would, any of them, that would be like, we're really interested in reuniting the Schenn brothers. Like, what the hell would they care? Like, they're looking at making their team better and adding, if it happens to be the two brothers, fine, but we're really interested in getting them back together, like as if that's like a cool story. They would like, I don't see it. Interesting. Not saying they couldn't go to the same team, but I do not see a GM having that being a priority of getting them back together. Like, what the hell does he care? He's not in the business of having neat headlines that Sportsnet, you know what I mean? It's just kind of odd thing to say. Anyways, both players could be used by the Toronto Maple Leafs. A right-handed defenseman who's familiar with the market, who's had success playing with Morgan Riley. That would be a good story. And then, Braden Schenn, he is he's got the pedigree, he's got the experience, he's got the Stanley Cup. Centerman who plays with grit, who plays hard, who understands what it takes to go on a playoff run. I think it'd be fantastic. Again, what do you need to do to get those players on your roster? Think it would be tough.
Certainly in the money aspect, again, every conversation we have over the next few weeks will be stemmed around the salary cap and what happens with it. But Brayden Schenn, after this one, has 3 years left at 6.5 mil per season. Luke Schenn, 1 year left at 2.75 million per season. If you had to pick one, if you had the chance to pick up one of the two, who are you grabbing?
Oh, you can't do that to me.
Yes, I can.
I can't. Honestly, if I was leaning towards one or the other, I would say.
I think it's Luke.
Or yeah, I was gonna say, I think I was gonna say Brayden because
Yeah.
he's just younger and like that depth piece. And it seems like when we get into the playoffs, if Mitch and Willie or Austin don't take off, the way like they have sometimes, it's like, where are they? We need you to score that big goal. They don't. I think he could be a guy that facilitates that and keeps the wheels going while those guys figure their shit out. But I like the depth that would bring to the forward, but I like the depth it would bring to the D too. I think tough one. I can't pick. You pick Luke, I pick Brayden, I guess.
No, it's fair. And if you bring in Brayden, like, I think there's marginal concern from my standpoint, like the miles, how heavy he plays. And then, like, I think there's a strong possibility John Tavares is re-signed, I'll say. So what's your center ice position look like? Can Brayden Schenn be a 2C? If you think Tavares is going to be a winger at some point in time over the next couple of years, how does that slot? Because then that gets to a point where you get to a convo about your third line in a year from now, and it has two aging guys and Brayden Schenn and John Tavares on it,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm kind of thinking more about this season. You kind of talk about after the fact.
Yeah.
I'm not as worried about after the fact. I mean, the cap is going up. We'll see what happens with Mitch, and John is going to take quite a haircut. You're going to have room to work with, and it's not going to be this dire situation with the cap in next year and the year after. It's this year. Are you making a run right now, or is this the time, or is anyone even thinking that? And when I think of Brayden coming to the team, I think about in the playoffs this year. What does that look like? How good can this team get now for a run today? And that's kind of my concern, dealing with the depth and the shuffle and where everyone fits for years after. I'm kind of waiting for the summer for that, to be honest. But yeah, I know that's a potential. It's just like, nothing's perfect. You can't get a whole bunch of studs with a ton of experience who play heavy, who are only 24. Like it doesn't work like that. What's good about Brayden? Experience, plays heavy, and then you just kind of made that seem like, oh, well, that means he's old and he's prone to get injured. Like, fuck, you can't have it all, right? I look at the positives in a guy like him.
LJ writes in, better question, Brayden Schenn and Bennett or re-sign Marner?
I know everyone keeps linking Bennett to the Leafs this year. His stock went through the roof, I think, with that Four Nations Cup, and I think there'll be a lot of people looking for him. But fuck, I don't know, man. I don't know what they're going to do with Marner. I absolutely don't. I think that he's been playing great, got some wicked experience, and came through in the clutch and some heavy hockey there in the Four Nations. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. I don't think they re-sign him beforehand. I think that'll just be the deciding factor. And I don't know how they can even. But then you're walking away from him for nothing, and all you're getting is the cap space. I think it's too hard to do that with how many people love Mitch and how many followers and people that are on Mitch's side. You can see it on Twitter. It's very polarizing. The people that say move on and the people that say how could you possibly. It's a tough job for Tree. I'm glad I don't have it, to be honest.
Scary. We'll see what happens over the next 11 days here. The Daily Faceoff Trade Deadline Special is coming away on Friday, March 7th, 11 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the Daily Faceoff YouTube channel. Instant reaction, expert analysis, special guests, whatever happens, the DFO crew will have you covered on deadline day, March 7th, 11 a.m. Eastern time, Daily Faceoff YouTube channel. It's time for the last call, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code NATION, all in uppercase today. That's NATION, N-A-T-I-O-N. Only 2 games on the NHL slate on this Monday. I like the over. San Jose, Winnipeg, over 5.5.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, Winnipeg's a goal scoring machine. I've talked about their first line for a while. They are just deadly. I was going with a player. I was going to pick Scheifele to score a goal. I think you get plus money on that. And there's a guy who, people talk about potentially may have been snubbed on that Four Nations roster. Kind of hard to argue with now that they've won, but a very potent player who might have a little chip on his shoulder, thinking about the playoffs or thinking about, being left off Team Canada with the Olympics coming up. I could see him playing with a little bee in his bonnet down the stretch here, and I'm looking to him score against that lackluster team in the Sharks.
Lisa Grinton writes in, great chat today. I couldn't agree more. You folks are fantastic. We look forward to Tuesday's podcast. We're going to preview another one with the Boston Bruins. It's game 2 of this 4-game road trip, and I like the fact that the Leafs can bury Boston again like they did last time. The Bruins need wins badly. The Leafs can go into TD Garden, win a hockey game, and bury their enemy.
Yeah, it's nice to get on the right side of this right now. And you look at the standings, Tampa's kind of, they were kind of an afterthought for a while there. They're scratching and clawing and looking like they're in okay shape too. So all these points are important. It's just it's literally such a nice, refreshing thing to be on the right side of things, leading that division and going into Boston, not feeling like you've got bad juju going on. We've got some good things to remember on so far. So looking forward to that one on Tuesday and teeing it up tomorrow.
At the Leafs Nation 401 here on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Leafs Morning Take wherever you find your podcast. Make sure to leave us a 5-star review. And don't forget to visit theleafsnation.com. Thank you to producer Vic. For Jay Rosehill, I'm Nick Alberga. We'll talk tomorrow. Take care. Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long-form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.